Hello again. Here we are at part 3 of this little finger knitting guide slash tutorial thingamadoohickey. This is the part that actually has to do with finger knitting itself. I do not know if the terms that I use are normal terms. I am a goof, as most people who know me will know, and I'm also someone who thinks language is something that is fun to mess with as much as possible. So if I use strange words and I use strange terms and people who actually do the craft look at it and wonder if I was on some kind of new medication or something, that's just how it's going to go. But I will do my best to explain and demonstrate. I did practice a little bit with finger knitting onto my right hand with my left. I don't know how the terminology goes. Onto my left with my right hand, because, right hand dominant, that's been the norm. That's how I learned it. I did experiment a little bit doing it onto my right hand with my left hand. It was very awkward, and it's actually kind of helpful because I can use it to kind of train my other hand and do a little bit of fun offbeat things. It actually gives me some ideas in terms of trying to work with one of my kids who I intend to train to use his non-dominant hand for writing, so a little bit of practice there. Coordination practice and whatnot. Alright, so going ahead and getting started. In front of me here, or underneath the camera, however you want to look at it, I have 3 chains. These 2 are tied together. This one was not, so I could demonstrate the thing about the tails earlier. These are 2, 3, and 4 finger chains. I didn't do anything else with them except for tie these 2 into loops. I also, when I make them, I don't think I did it with this one, but normally I will tie it, like wrap the yarn around to tie it off so that it's a little bit more stable. You don't always have to do that. I've just been doing it lately. But other than tying it off and then tying it into these circles, I haven't done anything with these chains, anything whatsoever. So these are just, again, 2, 3, and 4 finger chains. I'll demonstrate the 2. I think the 2-finger variety of finger knitting is probably the best one to teach kids. It's technically the easiest one to lose the stitches, but doing it with 4 fingers is a lot more coordination and planning and cognitive aspect to it. So I think it's probably better to start with the 2-finger. If you feel starting a kid on the 4-finger or even the 3-finger is going to work better for them, by all means, I'm not going to stop you. I will try to demonstrate the 3 and 4-finger. I'm actually going to do 2, 3, and 2-finger first to demonstrate, and then I'll show the 3 and the 4. They're basically the exact same process, so it's not a big deal. I'm going to finish up by doing it on my other hand just to kind of demonstrate it's the same process, it's just the other hand. Expect it to be clumsy. I've only done it once so far. And then after I do that, I'm going to, like I mentioned in the previous video, I'm going to knit this together over 2 fingers. So it'll be a 2x2 is what I keep calling it. So I do it number of fingers. So usually it's 2 fingers for all the demos, but if I'm doing it for myself, even absentmindedly, or for that mega rope I did of the velvet, I do 4. And then, so I do that by, so if I'm doing this one over my fingers, this is a 2 chain, so this is a 2 by, since I'm doing it again, 2 by 2. So that's my terminology. I don't know what the normal terminology is, but that's what I've been using because I am my own creature and march to the beat of my own drummer, or some random idiom that you want to fill into that space. I don't need these anymore at this point, so moving off the side. I actually have this length here. So I was mentioning that I was using specific pre-cut lengths. That's what I'm going to do going forward. This was not a pre-cut length. This was not a pre-cut length. This, as I mentioned before, was 2 yards. I could not tell you how long this is. It might have been 7 yards. That's about the best I have. So anyway, I'm just going to lace them out. how you let the yarn sit is kind of irrelevant. When I'm doing it on the balls, I just let the ball roll around. If I'm doing it from the skein, I will try to control it somehow, but usually I do the end or center pull. Whenever I get down to using these bundles with kids in the future, not these ones specifically, I'm just going to untie it and then just let it sit there, and however it comes off, it comes off. That's not the best thing sometimes, because anyone who's worked with yarn enough knows that this is going to knot like nobody's business. But I've been pretty lucky, and even if it knots, you technically have both hands available to do stuff, because it will sit on your hand and not just fall off, as long as you do a reasonable level of tightness. If you're working with a kid or an adult who needs a little bit of assistance, you can always just stop where you are and help them while it's still sitting on your fingers, help them untangle it or whatever. It shouldn't be an issue. Like, you can always just hold it, like hold the tail, potentially both tails. You just hold it in the space of your thumb, between your thumb and your index finger, and it should work just fine. It should stay in place. All right, so the process isn't super complicated. It's definitely one that takes a lot of cognitive effort for kids, kids who haven't done it before, and especially kids who have fine motor or processing difficulties. A lot of my kids who I'm introducing this to with executive function difficulties are having some real issues, motor planning as well. So definitely the first few times you do it with them, or the first time if you're planning on doing it for a while, definitely expect it to go pretty slow, expect it to take a lot of correction. Like I said, that one kid that I was working with who is working on frustration tolerance, he would lose the stitches pretty much every single time the first few times he did it, and it was frustrating him, but that's why you just gotta watch and make sure. And in his case, I have to let him fail, because in case, frustration tolerance. So just be ready to pick up where you need to, and be ready to restart it. Sometimes when it comes off and you're trying to undo it to get all the stitches free, it will kind of knot a little bit. You just work it a little bit, it should be okay. That's actually another benefit of this Charisma a little bit. It is, because it's so big, it's pretty good to come apart. That's also a downside, though, is because it's so big, the strands can separate and it gets a little harder to untangle. That's actually a benefit of this yarn, is it's really easy to detangle it. The velvet style, one of the things it's actually known for is like clumping with itself very easily. It holds onto itself very well when you're like knotting or deknotting it. So this might be easier to deknot if you get to that point while working with someone. But anyway, so let's go ahead and start the process. So I usually start with my tail. So this initial bit that you have in your hand, this is going to be one tail, and this tail will get longer once you start going. So don't make it extremely long to start out, but you want it to be enough that it's there. You don't want it too short, because the first stitch you pull off is going to tug on this tail. So if you have your tail starting all the way up here, it's just going to come off. You don't even have an option there. I usually go about half my hand, and I'm a lot more comfortable with it. For an adult, probably your whole hand, the whole length with your palm, until you get more comfortable with it. It's probably a good place to start. For kids, I just let them have some hang off, because that gives them more than enough tail to work with, and it's less likely to lose the stitch up here. Like, they watch me doing it, and I put it up here, and I really need to get in the habit of letting my tail fall off so that they have a little bit more of a guidance there. But anyway, so you want to get the tail initially into your hand. So you want to lay it across your palm. Doesn't matter where. I'm currently putting it in, my my arch here, but you really just need it across your palm, and hold on to it with your thumb. This is as good a place to start as any. It's going around the back of your hand. It's across your palm. You have it stable. That is the best place to start. And making sure kids hold it like this first, and they're actually holding it with their thumb. Big important step, because it's very easy for it to fall off. Don't work on this too long, though, because this cramps the thumb super quickly. So now we're going to go ahead and move on from there. So you take the yarn. So the yarn that's not the tail is the working end. This is, even for the people who do know yarn, just as a reminder, this is the working side. So most of it is pretty simple. Someone mentioned that it's a figure eight, and that's exactly what it is. The figure eight starts going around the back of your index finger. So you let it go around, drape over the back of your index finger, and then you come up toward the palm side between your index and middle fingers. Then you wrap it around your middle finger, going around back around the back, so that you have it back here, and then back forward across the front of the index finger, going from between the middle and index fingers. So show that again. So go around behind the index finger, up forward into the palm between the middle and index fingers, around the middle finger toward the back, wrap around the back of the middle finger, back forward between the index and middle fingers, and then in front of the index finger. That is one figure eight. That's one loop. That's one pass. I don't know how you want to word that, but you just do the exact same thing to get a second one on. You have to have at least two in order to do this. There's probably ways to do it with like 3 or more or what have you, but we're only going to do this because that's honestly the way I've bothered to learn it yet, and that's just what I'm trying to teach kids. I'm not trying to get too fancy with it yet. Not even for myself. So again, you have these two. You have it on your index finger and your middle finger, and then you go ahead and just do the exact same thing. Go around the back of your index finger, come up toward your palm between the index and middle fingers, go in front of the middle finger, and then wrap it around. Go around the back of the middle finger, come forward between your index and middle finger, and then there you go. I always recommend, even to the kids, I recommend holding on to both the tail and the working end this first stitch, because it's going to be a lot easier to keep control of it that way. You want it so that when you turn your palm down, you don't have to turn your palm down, but if you turn your palm down, you have 2 loops on both fingers. And you will end up pulling this back one here shortly. I've been flipping my hand over while demonstrating. That is for demonstration purposes. I always do it kind of like my hand is pretty much like this while I'm working it. And even when I start pulling it off, sometimes I will pull this way, sometimes I will flip my hand over, but you can do it with your palm facing you the whole time. It's not an issue. Anyway, so while holding on to both the tail and the working end, take the loop that is closest to your knuckle, more proximal. You take it and you just slip it all the way over your finger. Make sure you go over the loop that is a little bit more distal. So again, you take this more proximal one, take the ones closer to your knuckle, you lift it up over the one that's closer to the tip of your finger, all the way off your finger, take it all the way off. It now looks utterly ridiculous in the front. You take the tail, not the working end, you take the tail and you pull it down a little bit. I just did something which I'll explain on the next pass. Pull the tail down. Now the tail is really long. I told you the tail would get longer. This is not even the longest it'll be. So after you've pulled this down, hold on to it a little bit. So you can use your ring and ring finger and pinky to hold on to it. You can use your thumb to hold on to it. It really doesn't matter. It helps to have a little bit of stability. You won't have to do that after this first stitch. While you're holding it, go ahead and pull ever so lightly on the working end. That's just to make sure the stitches themselves are tight. You do not actually need to death grip it onto your hand, cut off circulation. I've had to repeatedly tell kids, only so much pressure. You're just doing this so it's not super loose. You're not doing it so that it is trying to garrote your fingers, try to, cut them off via yarn, that kind of thing. It's just making it a little bit more tight so that the yarn is holding onto itself. So now that you've got this first stitch, you can mostly ignore the tail. In fact, it's helpful to completely ignore it, but some kids tend to try to wrap it as well. So watch whoever you're working with, kid or otherwise, make sure they don't use the tail to continue, because the one that does not end, at least not yet anyway, the one that does not end is your working yarn. So you want to hold on to that. That's what you want to be working with. So again, you wrap it around, you're doing the next run now, next pass. So you go around the back of your index finger, come forward into your palm between the index and middle fingers, go in front of the middle finger, around the back, around, and then come forward between the index and middle finger. Again, I'm holding on to the working end. Technically, you don't really need to do that much, especially after this next stitch. So now, again, I'm flipping over so you can see, sometimes I'll do it this way. I also bend my fingers, and I'll explain that here shortly, but you, again, take the loop off, the one that is closer to your knuckle, that's the one that comes off. I always go index, middle. I think technically it doesn't matter which order you do the fingers in. You just need to make sure you always get the loop that is closer to your knuckle. If you have more space between the two different loops, it's easier to find which one you're grabbing. But for the most part, you just grab the ones closer, take it off your finger, make sure you pass over the one that's closer to the tip. So now, last time I shouldn't specify this. I did it, but I didn't talk about it. So before you pull this tight, if you pull these two loops that are still in your finger, if you pull it down closer to your palm, it becomes easier to just go ahead and keep going from there. If you don't keep pulling it down, you have to do it at some point, or it'll just slowly creep off your finger, because you do have to constantly make sure it's the outer one that you're going over. And it's just easier while it's still loose to pull it tight. Anyway, again, pull the tail, tighten it up a little bit. Now that you have more than one stitch, it does actually take a little bit more to pull tight. This is now as long as it's going to be, unless you like pull it really tight later. Anyway, so now this isn't seeming to make much of a difference. It will as time goes on. Pull this tight enough so that you're just bundling it back up. You're making the stitch. Now you do this exact same process. Take the working end, go behind your index finger, forward between your index and middle, around the front, and then around the back of your middle finger, forward toward your palm, between the index and middle fingers, and you're good. So now I'm going to go ahead and talk about why I bend my fingers, which I found very helpful, and it's hard to explain to kids. So while it is very useful, kids try to emulate it but don't know what to do. It's hard to explain to them to really get it down, so expect them to just do something where they fully bend their fingers or fully leave them straight. But either way, the primary thing to watch out for them and to help them with is to make sure they're always grabbing the one closest to the knuckle, closest to the palm, and then getting that one over the one closer to the tip of the finger, and then taking it all the way off. So I bend my fingers because if you're following along doing this yourself, you may notice that this tightens up, this top loop, it tightens up just a little bit because you're flexing your finger and it bulks up a little bit. That's one reason. It gives it a little bit more grip. But another is that it's just easier to control, because this isn't going to slide off as easily unless I give it more slack. And if I'm taking the slack here, then this one's not going to have anything it can do. So it gives that little extra support to help not lose the stitches. Anyway, go ahead and pull this down again. And this is why you want to pull it tight again, because you want this nice, and you want to pull off the stitches and get them bunched up to be chains. But this steals some of your actual working yarn. So that's why you want to also tighten it a bit. It helps when you're tightening if you hold on to where the tail bundle is down here, but you don't really have to. Anyway, since I've explained it a few times to do the path, the passes around, I'm just going to do it a few times just to show. I'm going to hold I'm not going to turn my hand over anymore unless it do it automatically. So this way you can just see it does go pretty quickly. It's not especially complicated to do once you get it down. It's actually very handy. You'll notice that instead of it being above the PIP, it's actually down in between, in the space between the PIP and DIP. It's just kind of how it ends up getting onto my finger. Wherever it ends up, bending the finger still helps keep it on no matter where it is on the finger. And you'll notice, like, this isn't taking me a whole lot of concentration. I did this during a meeting with 4 fingers, and it was going rather well. And nobody called me out on it, but, which I was expecting. But like that's when I was working on that very thick velvet rope as I was doing it during a meeting. And sometimes it can take no concentration at all. I'm going to do something I haven't done at all yet. I mean ever. So I'm doing this on video. So there you go. I'm going to try introducing my third finger. And I think that really just makes it slightly more dense, but I'm going to try it this way and we'll see how it goes. So I'm doing the exact same process. So this is just so I can show more fingers without restarting the whole thing. So I'm doing the same process. I'm going behind my index finger, coming forward between my index and middle, coming in front of my middle finger, but since I also have my ring finger up, I'm going between, so I'm going behind my hand, to the back of my hand, between the middle and ring finger. Then I'm just doing kind of the same figure 8, although now it's more like figure snowman, coming coming from behind the ring finger, looping it around, coming in front, and then going to the back between the middle and ring fingers, and then finishing up by coming forward between the index and middle finger. This part does not change. At no point does the yarn coming forward between these two fingers ever change no matter how many fingers you're doing. I haven't done like finger purling or anything like that yet. That might change depending on how you're doing it. Anyway, so as far as I can tell with what I'm currently doing, like I said, I haven't done this before, I'm only going to pull off these two. I'm not going to touch this one at all. I'm just going to leave this one alone. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this off, and now I have it going over 3 fingers. And now I just do the exact same process, going around back, coming forward, going around back, coming forward, back, forward. And now, since I have 2 loops on all 3 fingers, I take off all 3 of them, and I have now made a slightly denser chain by adding my 3rd finger. There are some little shortcuts you can add to this that some kids might want to pick up on, and you have to be careful knowing them because you might demonstrate them and kids will try to emulate. For instance, since I have 3 fingers now, when I'm going behind my index finger, I can just hold my middle finger back and just quickly do that because I'm cutting in front of the middle finger while I do it. And then going the other way, just hold middle finger forward, and there you go. That is a shortcut. I don't necessarily recommend it because I have messed it up a few times, but like, it's something that you start automatically doing as you do this more. And like I said, you might show it to kids and mess them up, mess up the teaching, that kind of thing. So this time I'm actually add the 4th finger. So I'm going to demonstrate that shortcut again while I come around this way, but I'm not going to really do a whole lot more than that. Anyway, so now I got the 4th finger. I've been holding onto this with my thumb while I'm working, so that kind of makes a difference. Sometimes it's a lot easier to handle it while you're working. Kids aren't always going to do it. You don't have to get them to do it. So that's really a preference on how you want to introduce it to the kids. Anyway, like I said, 4 fingers now. I'm going to do that shortcut thing just to get over the ring finger. Technically, you can do that with both fingers. So you can do the shortcut like this as well. So it'll be this exact same thing. Anyway, so I'm holding the middle finger back, going behind the index finger, coming forward on the other side of the ring finger, going around the back of the pinky, coming around the front of the ring finger, and then coming around the front of the index finger. Again, since I only have 1 loop on the pinky, I'm only going to take off the index, middle, and ring fingers, leaving the one on the pinky so I can get up to 4. Now, like I said, you can do the shortcut with all the fingers. So now I'm going to go ahead and do weep, and then weep. And that is getting it up quickly over all 4. Do it again. So that's pushing back. I actually, like I said, I haven't done this at all before, so I haven't even done the shortcut with all 4 fingers. So that's keeping the middle and pinky more extended, flexing the index and ring fingers, and then you can just bring it, off camera, bring it around the back of the ring finger. It will automatically have gotten in front of the middle finger, and then just move the index and ring fingers back and the middle and pinky forward, and then just go the other way. That is technically a shortcut. Once you get the motor memory side of it down, you can do it. I don't really ever do that, except unless I'm doing the 3 fingers, because keeping that level of control and coordination while you're using your pinky is very hard to do. I think there's a way to also reduce the number of fingers, but I'm not going to do it right now. I'm not showing how to end it off until I do it on my right hand. Or maybe the bigger chain, I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, so it's the same thing. You just keep doing this until you get to your desired length. You just keep going, doing that figure 8, figure snowman, figure double 8. I don't know how you'd work the 4th finger one, but you just keep doing that until you get it going as far as you want. I'm just taking it off so I can restart it. And you'll notice it just comes unraveled just quickly by pulling it. So if you want to use the same yarn with kids a bunch of times, you're good. This is what I was talking about it knotting when you're like undoing it. And this is why like the charisma may or may not be better. It also, for some reason, this is the second time it happened, it got stuck right there. All right, so now I'm going to do in my right hand with my left hand. And I'm only going to do 2 fingers because it is still breaking me. So like I said before, I'm holding on to the tail with my thumb. And I'm going around the back of my index finger, coming forward between my index and middle, around the back of my middle finger, forward between the two, and then just repeating that. Holding on, I've got the 2 loops, I'm just pulling it off. Make sure they're down. Pull the tail a little bit more tightly. Pull the working yarn, and then do it again. Again, this is not the way I learned how to do it. This is only the second time I'm doing it on my right hand, so awkwardness will continue to ensue. But you can see it's the same process. You just have to get the motor planning part of it down. And this is working it on my right hand instead. I'm not going to go the whole way. I said I might show how to end it on this hand, but like I said, I can already tell how long this video is going for an intro video, and like it's killing my hand already. So I'm going to switch over to this chain. Blop. I am going to start. I'll start on the green end. I did it with the other one, but I'll start on the green end on this one too. All right, so to double up, so this is already a 2 chain. I'm about to make it a 2x2. Does not make it does not make it similar to a 4 chain, at least not as far as I know. But we will see here shortly. It is the exact same process. However, this is not your tail. This is your tail. Any additional tail you have from the single strand is just extra tail you have. However, if whatever tail you want, this is going to be your tail, because you are not going to have this in the 2x2. Using a tail that uses only the single strand, you get more opportunity to have the 2x2 as part of the whole thing, but you also run the risk of this being your actual tail. Shouldn't actually matter too much, but if you care about aesthetics, yeah. This is more of a once you're doing it for a larger craft kind of idea, instead of just introing it to kids or adults even. So that might not matter too much in the long run, or might not matter too much right away, but might in the long run. Anyway, so like I said, it's a 2x2. You just saw me doing it on 2 fingers. It is this exact same process. You hold onto the tail, go behind the index, forward between the 2 fingers, behind the middle, and then come forward again between the index and middle, do it again. So the reason why you want as a little bit of the tail of the existing chain is because you still have to pull this off over your finger. And you may notice I'm having a little bit of trouble. This is the problem I was having with that chenille thread. This yarn, this gets very hard to do because it is a very, very thick, it's already kind of tight, it doesn't have as much stretch as it did before. And you'll notice even after trying to give it basically no tail of the original 2 chain, I still have a 2 tail. So I'm going to repeat that process. I'm going to keep going. The index finger is almost always the hardest one. Correction. The index finger is almost always one of the 2 hardest ones. The pinky one really sucks to hold onto the yarn while you're doing it. Whether it's repeating a chain or it's the initial chain. I haven't even done a 4-finger chain because the pinky is so hard. But you can see how this chain is coming together right now. So it's coming much thicker. And I was right. This does not even actually look like the 4x, because one, this is much denser, because this is actually, it's 2, 2, 2. It's going over multiple times. This is still super luxurious, the 4 one. This 2x2 is not as luxurious. So I actually think this one is a nicer one to have, but this one is a much more interesting kind of chain. So that is your mileage may vary. You may choose to do it a specific way. I am not going to comment any further on that specific part of it. That's up to you. So I'm going to keep finishing this up because I need to finish up this video, and I need to show how to tie it off. So continuing to go. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I haven't mentioned how to save it, by the way. If you want to save it for continuing another time, all you really have to do, and this kind of ties into how to end it. So I'm going to grab a pencil. Pencil is kind of the easiest way to save it. You just take the pencil, and you have inside the loop between your finger and the yarn, you just slide the pencil between that. And when you take it off, it says where the loops are. At this point, if I tug on the working yarn, I can't take it off. I can just tighten it. It does make it annoying to re-loosen in order to continue working with it, but I mean, That's definitely better than completely losing it entirely and having to start over. A suggestion would be to make sure you go through the loops in the same direction. So if you go through every single loop, whether it's 2, 3, or 4 fingers, go through the loop. Like if I'm doing this way, I'm going toward the tip of my finger. If I go over to this one and go through it toward the tip of my finger, I have it the same way. So there's no question about what the orientation is going back onto my fingers. If I go through toward the tip, boop, 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 and then I come around the other way and I go through toward the palm or back of my hand or whatever, I have to remember I did it exactly that way. Unless you do that consistently every single time, it may be better just always go the same way each time. That's just a suggestion. That is another your choice is your choice. Okay, continuing on so I can finish up this this chain. Once I finish the chain, I'll see how it actually feels then, because while they're in progress, they do actually feel quite a bit different than when they're finished, because you have a certain part that's really tight and you can't tug on too hard, another part that's actually really, that's, well, much looser and it's completed. So I'm not giving a final critique on how this feels until I actually finish this off. And you can see me wiggling my fingers a bunch. That actually really helps with getting it fully down to the end, usually, or the bottom of toward the knuckle. You don't have to do that when you're doing the single strand quite as much, especially if you're using the basic acrylic yarn, simply because it's thinner, it's smaller, it's easier to slide. It pretty much is no problem whatsoever. I mentioned before that I didn't have any problem using this yarn for a long period. The only reason I do right now is because, one, I stabbed myself with the drill earlier, whoops, and two, because I was using a different yarn, and I'm trying to rush right now, so I'm actually catching some of my hairs, but for the most part, it's fine. All right, so there is no more 2 length that I can do. If I start going over, I'm going to get to the 1. So I am officially done. I can't do any more with the 2 chain part of this rope. So now I'm going to show how to end it. So because I have this nice long tail with the one strand, I'll just use that to thread through. So what you do is, just like I just did with the pencil, I want to go a direction. It honestly doesn't matter when you're finishing off. It might matter, I don't know. It might give different kind of tightnesses or stabilities or what have you. But for the time being, we're just going to say I'm going to go through however it feels right at the time. And I'm just going to go from proximal side to distal side, knuckle side to tip side, however you want to term it. I'm going to feed the yarn through, and that goes all the way through that loop. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other finger. I'm going to go knuckle side to fingertip side. And right now, I now have the yarn going through both. I want it to be a little bit tighter in a moment, because I want to try to have this 2 be what goes through the thing, but it shouldn't matter. We'll see. I'm going to start feeding it through now just to make it easier. I take out my index finger, and then tug this a little bit so it's a little bit tighter. And then I try to get the 2 through the, okay, I got the 2 through the middle finger one as well. Technically I have both fingers still in the loops. You don't need to at this point. Once you get the yarn through one of the loops, it is good as long as you keep it going through. I kept it here for control, so I could try to get this 2 through. That is your choice. I'm doing it for this chain specifically, and then you pull this 2 chain a little bit tighter, and I now have a 2x2 chain. Giving a final comment on the feel of it, I think that this is a nice soft chain. I think I prefer the velvet one, but this is a very nice chain because it's 2x2. I wonder how it would be different if it was a 4x2, but I think it would actually be too dense at this point. I think my preference as far as this yarn is the 4 chain, not the 2x2. Just to add a little bit more sensory comment there since I'm done with this. But that is how you do that. Hopefully that was a good enough explanation so that folks can follow along. Did demo it a few times, so there's a few opportunities to see it and hopefully participate. Like I said, it's pretty easy to do. Once you get the hang of it, you can go pretty quickly. You can do it with very little visual effort, so it can be a pretty decent fidget, but kids are going to need real coaching on saying, hey, only do this during certain times, because I'm sure some kids will be like, I'm going to do it whenever I want, which is exactly what the kids at that Montessori school I was volunteering at were trying to do. They were trying to do it during work time. That's not work. Anyway, that is my little guide on how to actually do the finger knitting part of it. Hopefully that has helped folks kind of get an idea of how to approach it and maybe introduce it to other folks. Thank you for suggesting, and thanks for watching.